Natural disasters, as tragic as they are, used to be a time in America where people could come together. They could rally around one another and make sure that everybody had the helping hand they needed to move forward with their lives. But that's not really the world we live in today. Things have become so politicized that people, instead of rallying around one another, would prefer to score cheap political points. They would rather cast aspersions at the sitting administration or blame others, all in an effort to get their guy to win in November. It's actually been quite disheartening, because I know America is better than this, and I know that most Americans are better than this, and it's just the loud minority of people that are really kind of ruining it for the rest of us, making us an absolute embarrassment on the world stage. We have people like this guy who, for whatever reason, wants to undermine the mainstream media, saying, is it just me, or is a majority of the mainstream media ignoring the devastation caused by Hurricane Helene? In what world does this guy live in? Mainstream media has had wall-to-wall coverage on this stuff. My YouTube feeds are being overrun with stories about Hurricane Helene. So why undermine the mainstream media? It just makes no sense. And then we have people like Stu Peters, who's saying things like this: Hurricane Helene was a weather-modified storm used to displace people in western North Carolina so elites can run a land grab on one of the biggest lithium deposits in the country. Stu Peters is a known conspiracy theorist, but this is a whole new level, in my opinion. In what world do we have the technology to guide hurricanes in certain places? It doesn't make any sense. And it's just another way to try to undermine our institutions, to try to make it seem like the Democrats are the bad guy or whatever. It's just gross. And we have people like this who are spreading even more radical conspiracy theories, saying that they are using HAARP to ensure that Hurricane Helene devastates the largest Republican stronghold area in Florida. This hurricane will destroy homes, displace thousands, and ensure much less participation in the presidential election in November. They will stop at nothing. Are these people actually serious? Are Democrats really that evil? Setting aside the part where controlling hurricane and the path it takes with something like HAARP being absolutely impossible, you're really painting Democrats as these evil beings that would wreak havoc on other Americans in this way? This is just despicable stuff. Despicable. And then we have people like this who say, my mom hasn't had power in days. She lives in the Carolinas and has heart condition. I wish all of those taxes I paid the past couple years went there and not to other countries. Trying to imply that the aid we send over to Ukraine for them to fight that war against Russia could somehow be spent here in the North Carolinas. That's just not how federal money works. We can do both. We are America. The money that is being allocated to Ukraine has nothing to do with the funds that are distributed via FEMA and other mechanisms. And then we have people like this. This is a pretty common one I've heard. The leaders are too busy pushing their woke agenda to care about real American cities in crisis. Asheville gets no attention because it doesn't fit their narrative. We're stuck with a president and VP more focused on virtue signaling than actually doing their jobs. Again, trying to imply that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are just sitting on their hands and doing nothing and watching all of this devastation take place. It's just gross. We know for a fact that federal resources have been deployed. Let's go ahead and listen to Deanne Criswell, who is the administrator of FEMA, explain just that and how these resources were deployed before the hurricane even made landfall. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were on top of things and made sure that the natural disaster declarations were made before landfall was ever made, to make sure that these communities were prepared in the best way that they could be with federal funding at their back.
This is a multi-state event that we have been preparing for since early in the week, and we started moving resources into the area on Monday, and we had resources in Florida, in Georgia, in North Carolina, South Carolina, things like our urban search and rescue teams, communications equipment, as well as many of our federal partners like the Army Corps of Engineers. Our search and rescue teams, they have been actively engaged through the night, and they are still actively doing rescues in Florida. We also hear about active rescues still going on in the Georgia area. The threat from this storm is not over yet, even though the...
So that is the administrator of FEMA saying that we have all of these different resources that have been deployed. People are on the ground from the federal government. This is what we should expect in the times of disaster. Biden was on top of things and made sure that these resources were deployed appropriately to make sure that these people had the help that they need. But we still have people like Benny Johnson trying to say that, Asheville, North Carolina is devastated. Where is our president and vice president? Again, trying to imply that Biden and Harris are nowhere to be found. Like they're just leaving the American people out to dry. I mean, how disgusting are these people? Do you really think that of President Biden? You may not like his policies, but he has shown that he has empathy for people and that he cares about America. So to even try to put this type of thing on him is just beyond me. We can do better than this, guys. Come on. Let's go ahead and listen to Kamala Harris talk about the actual steps that she's taken, or the steps that have been taken, to make sure that these people are cared for in the best way that the federal government can.
I want to talk about Hurricane Helene for a moment. And I know that everyone here sends their thoughts and prayers for the folks who have been so devastated by that hurricane and the ensuing events in Florida, in Georgia, the Carolinas, and other impacted states. And we know that so many have been impacted, some have died. But I want to thank everyone for doing everything you can to think about them, send them your thoughts, send them your prayers. I want to thank the first responders who have done so much. And we will stand with these communities for as long as it takes to make sure that they are able to recover and rebuild. Earlier today, I received an operational briefing from FEMA Director Criswell. More than 3,300 federal personnel have been mobilized. We are deploying food, water, and generators and working to restore water and power. And the President and I have told state and local leaders we will provide whatever help they need in the days and weeks ahead. And so I thank you all for sending your best wishes to everyone there. Thank you.
This is what leadership looks like. And the America that I know and recognize is standing right behind her, cheering for the first responders involved that are there on the ground, rescuing people and starting to rebuild. The people cheering for the federal response of resources being deployed so people can get their lives back together. That is the America I recognize. And at the very same time, we have somebody like Donald Trump who is just denying that climate change is even a real thing.
No, but think about this. I haven't heard, Mike, they don't even talk about the environment anymore. You know why? Mike is saying, don't talk about it now. No, it's one of the great scams of all time.
Now, I'm not saying that climate change is the specific cause of this particular hurricane, but we do know that climate change is making hurricanes more devastating. We know that we are having more severe weather events due to climate change. And we have somebody like Trump who just wants to deny its existence, which is absolutely wild to me. This was after the hurricane made landfall. And he's coming out and saying, yeah, climate change is just a scam, everybody. I mean, how insane is that? We have Biden, who recently gave a press conference promising Americans that he will be here every step of the way until the job is done. This is what real leadership looks like.
I want them to know we're not leaving until the job is done. I also want you to know I'm committed to traveling to the impacted areas as soon as possible, but I've been told that it would be disruptive if I did it right now. We will not do that at the risk of diverting or delaying any of the response assets needed to deal with this crisis. My first responsibility is to get all the help needed to those impacted areas. And I expect to be there, excuse me, I have a cold, I expect to be there later this week. I and my team are in constant contact with the governors, mayors, and local leaders. The head of FEMA, Deanne Griswold, is on the ground now in North Carolina. She's going to stay in Asheville and Appalachia region for the foreseeable future.
So what he said right here is very important. He is saying that he is staying out of the way. He's not going to the affected areas because that would divert resources away from the locals that need it. It is very important. What happens when a president comes to town? They need a motorcade. They need security detail. Local officials need to be involved and make sure everything is running appropriately. It makes absolutely no sense for the President of the United States to go to a disaster area and divert those funds away from people. But that's exactly what we saw Trump do in Georgia. This is him speaking in the actual debris caused by Hurricane Helene. He's out there diverting resources away from the people in Georgia that need it the most. And do we remember when Puerto Rico was hit by a major storm and Donald Trump was out there throwing paper towel to people like they were t-shirts at a concert? Do you remember this insanity? I mean, it's just absolutely embarrassing stuff. I would much prefer the Biden approach, where he's making sure that all of the tools available at his disposal are being deployed in a way that makes sense to the states that were affected, to the local officials that were affected, making sure that the disaster declarations were available, so unlocking federal funds. On the other hand, we have Donald Trump going into towns trying to get a photo op to make it look like he's helping the people of Georgia. At the very same time, pulling resources away from those very same people. Let's listen to Biden talk about the actual resources that have been deployed by the federal government.
I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities to rescue, recover, and to begin rebuilding. In addition to FEMA, it includes the Federal Communications Commission to help establish communications capability, the National Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Defense are going to provide all the resources at its disposal to rescue and assist in clearing debris and delivering life-saving supplies. So far, that's over 3,600 personnel deployed. That number is growing by the day. I quickly approved requests from governors of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, and Alabama for an emergency declaration. And I approved additional requests for the governors of North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, and for a disaster declaration to pay for debris removal and provide financial assistance directly to survivors. FEMA and the Small Business Administration are there to help the residents whose homes and businesses were literally destroyed, washed away, or blown away.
Now, I am not sitting here arguing that the federal response has been perfect or will be perfect in the future. It's very likely that we won't know for months whether or not there were missteps or bad decisions that were made during the federal response. But what we should recognize is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are leading this country. They are making sure that these resources are available to the affected states, all while you have these conservative influencers online trying to say that they're nowhere to be found and that the mainstream media is ignoring them and drumming up a whole bunch of other radical conspiracy theories. Things may not be perfect, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are seemingly handling this the way that we would expect our leaders to handle this. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump trying to go get photo ops in Georgia, diverting resources away just so he can score political points. It's completely self-serving behavior. He is a malignant narcissist that only cares about himself. He doesn't give a crap about the people on the ground in Georgia. All he cares about is getting that photo op so he could hopefully win in November to keep his ass out of jail. So don't let people try to spin you up stories that the federal government is nowhere to be found. And let's just remember the stark difference between somebody like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris when we vote this November. But I guess I'll leave it there. If you guys did get anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. I'm trying to make it to that 1,000 subscriber mark before the end of the year and would very much appreciate your support. If you want to learn how cognitive dissonance is ever so present in the MAGA universe, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.